So it's Gay Pride Month, and I want to take the opportunity to share some perspectives on our country, where we are, where we've come from, and where we need to go. Start with a little bit of history. In 1969, the police raided the Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village in New York City. It was a known but secretive, kind of a speakeasy type of a place, known gathering place for, in those days, what were called homosexuals. Inside the shelter of its walls, men could meet, they could dance, they could flirt with each other. But on June 28th, hence this is Gay Pride Month, just after 1 a.m., the New York City Public Morals Squad, there was one of those, led the charge to expose the so-called lasciviousness that was going on within those walls. Up until the violence at Stonewall, you see, gay men and lesbians and trans people kept their lives well beneath the public radar. Stonewall changed all that. Violence and protests spread over several nights, and those riots, the Stonewall Inn riots they're called, are recognized as the beginning of public, energetic activism on behalf of LGBTQ plus rights in this country. I was 8 years old. I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know anyone who was gay. At least that's what I thought. It seems my parents had an artist friend. His name was James Jim Harrell. And he would visit us periodically, and he'd stay in our house. And sometimes he'd stay for several days. And once he set up a studio in an extra room in our house, and I remember watching him paint. Decades later, we were reminiscing about Jim together with my parents. And they said, "You know he was gay, right?" He had died since then. I said, "I had no idea that he was gay." All through high school and even into college, I didn't give much thought, to be honest, to the existence of gays or lesbians. I mean, we'd often call each other gay, but it was only as a way of taunting or denigrating a fellow student. The idea that human beings could actually have a sexuality different from what we knew in each other was incomprehensible for most of us. Such was the level of ignorance of my generation, and I'm sure I'm talking to many of you who had the same experience. In the middle 1980s, I entered rabbinical school, and that was where things changed. I got to know the gay and lesbian members of my class, and yet, even though we all knew we had gay and lesbian members of our class, I remember sitting in Jerusalem at our college when the president of our school proudly told us that his school didn't admit any, he used the word again, homosexuals. And as he said it, I looked around and I watched the ashen faces of those same classmates. Their identity was so easily dismissed by a man who, it turns out, we found out later was actually a serial sexual predator. It was as appalling as it was shameful. So 20 years after Stonewall, in my own mid-20s, I experienced a transformation of awareness of sorts. And it followed, of course, the massive shift in awareness that was taking place throughout this country and maybe even the world. So by the time I was a parent, my own kids saw the world quite differently. They even grew up with two married uncles, our best friends, a gay clergy couple who spent so much time in our house they were part of the family. Even before high school, they were aware of their peers who were LGBT or Q. And they encouraged and supported friends who came out. And what took me until my mid-20s to even acknowledge, they accepted as non-controversial and a normal part of their world. How far we've come. Over the course of my career, I've counseled young adults and their parents. I've helped kids with strategies of coming out. I've supported their parents as they endeavored to embrace what they learned about their kids. For some, it was easy and natural. For others, it was a profound struggle. And when gay marriages became legal, I eagerly stepped up to officiate, learning the nuances of gay and lesbian ceremonies on the fly. I'm proud of our clergy who officiated gay marriages at this temple. I'm proud of the marriages we celebrate. I'm proud of the families we welcome. I'm proud of the leaders that we intentionally place on our board to hear the voices of our gay community. It's been 56 years since the Stonewall riots, 10 years since the Supreme Court made marriage between two people of the same gender legal. Maybe you, like me, hope that that would end, that we wouldn't have to be talking about gay rights anymore because the world would be opened up. That Pride Month would be almost superfluous and only an affirmation of what we've achieved. Instead, though, Pride Month is a reminder of what we have yet to achieve. Violence and discrimination against gay and transgender people continues. Recent decisions by the Supreme Court and policies in the military, coupled with official government policies, reflect that discrimination. Adoption by gay and lesbian couples remains difficult in many states. Gay conversion therapy, believe it or not, is still legal in some of those states. Inequalities in health care and access to housing, restrictions on even bathroom use endure, and it baffles me to try to figure out why we're still talking about this. Support for rights that reflect the needs of the LGBTQ community in this country now are actually moving us backwards. Proudly, is a bright spot, we can say Israel is by far the most progressive country in the region. Now, the bar is low, with all due respect. But Israel's even ahead. In many ways, Israel mirrors European standards for gay civil rights. Tel Aviv is an internationally recognized gay-friendly city. And if you've ever been, it is a celebration of gay culture. But even in Israel, their religious right, that's our Jewish religious right, manifests powerful hostility towards the LGBTQ community. And like the U.S., that same element is working really hard to undo the progress that Israel has achieved. So there's an interesting connection to this accounting, this brief history of gay rights in America and the world, and the current Torah portion. I thank Rabbi Sari for kind of planting this in my head. The Israelites in the Torah portion are at the border to the promised land. They would be the first generation of Israelites to cross over. But they were anxious, afraid, and nervous, so Moses sent scouts across the border to spy out the population and the landscape. And the majority of those scouts returned, and they only saw and only reported insurmountable challenges. In their minds and their eyes, the indigenous populations were frightening. They were giants. They were supernatural monsters. They were dangerous cliffs and raging rivers. And they turned to Moses and they said, "V'nehi be'enenu k'chagavim v'chen ha'inu be'enehem." We look like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we must have looked even worse to them. The implications of those words: we felt powerless. We will never succeed in reaching the promised land. Our self-doubt is so daunting that we can even imagine ourselves as being tiny in our adversaries' eyes. Well, ever since Stonewall, the LGBTQ community has refused to see themselves as grasshoppers. And that's what pride means. There are no more secretive Stonewall inns. There are no more hiding in the shadows. The vast majority of this country shares in that pride, and we are loud and proud allies if we're not loud and proud and gay. I believe that it's the Orthodox rabbi, who happens to also be gay, Stephen Greenberg, who asserted powerfully that all the mitzvot in the Torah are not necessarily equal. And he said that the greatest of them is the first of them. B'Tselem Elohim. Human beings enter this world in the image of God. All other principles, he said, are subordinate to that one. B'Tselem Elohim, that's the Jewish word for pride. It's a Jewish manifestation of that idea. Because living the full expression of one's gender and one's sexuality is to live fully in God's image. And when we do our parts to help the world become the place that we imagine, somewhere over the rainbow, if I could dare say, together, here's what we know. We can cross over the border, and we can certainly reach the promised land. Ken Yehi Ratzon. So may it be.